On today's Apple Daily, it is WWDC Wednesday, which means that we got an announcement yesterday. Now, the big question on everyone's lips is, why is everyone in the invitations wearing glasses? Much more coming on that later, but maybe not as long later as you think. So yeah, what we're going to do today is going to do a quick review of last year's WWDC, which was the first digital one. That will give us a good idea of what to expect at this next one, and we're going to look forward to what might be coming with the new versions of the software that comes at WWDC, and what else we might be getting too. So last year's first digital event opened with Tim Cook talking about Black Lives Matter and the killing of George Floyd, and also Apple's Developer Entrepreneur Program, as well as how the pandemic had affected Apple and their customers. Then first up, software-wise, we went into iOS 14, and its new features that were introduced included home screen getting the app library, widgets being added, picture-in-picture video, Siri getting the new minimal interface where you just get the little ball at the bottom of the screen, dictation on device, translate, which is actually a really powerful feature that I don't think many people have made much use of because nobody's been anywhere. Then messages got inline replies and pinned messages, maps got updated with cycling and look around, CarPlay got new wallpapers and new apps, Apple Car Key for BMWs and other people that can afford very expensive cars, and app clips, which really took off. So we ran a quick live stream yesterday once the news dropped about WWDC happening on June the 7th, which is the date which I didn't mention at the top, and that was probably a mistake. But June the 7th is the first day of WWDC 2021, and it's a week-long event that goes on behind the scenes for Apple developers so that they can learn about the new technologies. They can get direct access to some of Apple's engineering teams so that they can basically find out a lot more about how the apps work, how the frameworks work, and how they can incorporate them into their own apps. And because WWDC is digital this year, it means that a lot more developers actually get to be involved in stuff. And while we were doing that live stream, I did ask my audience that were there to drop down in the comments with a hashtag iOS 15 what they expect us to see coming out in this next version. So, Joe, who's one of our regular kind of question askers, these were his predictions. So, a home app widget, which sounds really good for home integration, which sounds great for home integration because Apple really wants to push HomeKit, interactive / now playing widgets, custom app icons, no more grid / place anywhere, custom theming, more editing tools in stock photos, revamped mail, music, podcast, and tips app, offline mode for Siri, smarter voice assistant, web inspector for Safari, split screen multitasking on the iPhone, a settings app redesign, lock apps via biometric or PIN, turn off the microphone and camera, and lock notes that include files, audio, or PDFs. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in there to break down. I do think that one of the big things is going to be customization of the way that your phone looks, and Apple's definitely taking good steps in that direction with iOS 14, with widgets. Widgets, I definitely think, are going to get more powerful. I think there's going to be more kind of interactivity within the widgets. I think they might take that widget system and bring it into the app icons themselves. So, as well as being able to customize your icons in an easier way than just setting up a shortcut that kind of bounces through the Shortcuts app to the app that you wanted in the first place, I think one of the other things that they might do is actually let the app icons contain some kind of dynamic information of some sort. Not at a super high level, maybe, you know, something that updates every 5 minutes or once a minute, something along those lines, so that rather than just having the notification dot, I think maybe we could go to some richer notifications on the app icons themselves. I definitely think split screen would make a lot of sense for, especially for the larger iPhones, the iPhone 12 Pro Max, for example, and the 13 Pro Max, presumably, would certainly be able to benefit from that. And if you remember, when we used to have the Plus iPhones, they used to actually have a landscape mode, so you could turn it sideways, and you would get landscape mode for your home screen. And a lot of kind of Apple's default apps, like Mail, really took advantage of it. I think they still do quite a lot of this stuff in there, but they definitely made more of it back in the days when we got the first Plus iPhones. I think it was the 6 Plus was the first one, and you got that landscape home screen. So that would be interesting to see come back as well, but it might really mess around with widgets. I wonder if that's why they got rid of it, so that your widgets kind of stay where they're meant to. He also mentions getting rid of the grid. I don't think the grid itself is going to go away, but I do think Apple might let us finally put in empty spaces, so that, or like transparent app icons, so that you can kind of see your background a lot more clearly behind there. I think it would also be really interesting if the app icons themselves were PNG style, so you could actually have alpha transparency in them, so you could actually have very minimal kind of circular app icons, although it might look a bit too much like Android at that point. So moving on to iPadOS.
Oh, hey, we made it. All right, well, let's jump right in.
Last year we got widgets for iPad, we got system level sidebars, which is basically in pretty much all of Apple's default apps. We got minimal notifications, exactly as we had before, so phone calls would come up just at the top of the screen instead of taking over the whole screen. We got the minimal search, which looks a lot more like Spotlight on the Mac, and we got Apple Pencil Scribble for handwriting recognition. Now, what are we looking at this year in iPads? I really want them to bring multiple user support. Bring it over to us, please, guys, especially for where households use a single iPad for multiple users. It would be super helpful to be able, especially with things like Apple Fitness Plus, for different users to be able to use that and it assign the exercise to the right people. I might do that already because it has to pair with an Apple Watch. But still, it would just be really useful to be able to use the biometrics on your iPad to log in as you, maybe on the higher storage versions, rather than just into the iPad with whoever's Apple ID is built into it. So, especially for family sharing, maybe this could be a way that Apple kind of pushes more into family sharing. Other than that, I've got no massive demands for the iPad. I would love to see the Pro apps come to it, obviously, which we've talked about a few times. A version of Final Cut come into it, a version of Logic. Just something that's a little bit more in-depth than iMovie and GarageBand, which GarageBand, to be honest, for me, audio-wise, is absolutely everything that I need, but I know there are a lot of people out there that would use a better version if they had it on the iPad. The other thing I would see is potentially more kind of integration with Apple's Pro apps. Apple also introduced AirPods automatic switching between devices and spatial audio, which is pretty magical. Now, I'm not really expecting new features coming to AirPods this time, unless they're actually putting some stuff in there in hardware. So, unless we're going to see these new AirPods at WWDC, which is unlikely because it's a developer event and not really sort of for consumer electronics, then I don't think we're going to see anything particularly new for AirPods, unless it's kind of maybe tying in spatial audio with Apple TV. Next up, we went to Apple Watch, multiple complications being added, new faces, face sharing, maps with cycling directions, exactly as we had on the iPhones, fitness with new workouts, but this wasn't Apple Fitness Plus, that wasn't released until much later in the year, sleep tracking and wind down, and also the hand washing detection that was added as a kind of COVID-safe part of it. Now, in terms of the Apple Watch this year, I think everyone wants to be able to buy an Apple Watch and not have it attached to an iPhone, and they went part of the way last year with family setup. You can have Apple Watch for your kids, and your kids don't then necessarily have to have an iPhone that it's attached to. It can be set up using an adult's phone, but I think we're getting to the point now where you should be able to set up an Apple Watch with cellular that is a completely standalone device. It doesn't need an iPhone to set it up. It would need to be able to get its own over-the-air updates. It would need to be able to get all of that sort of thing without having the iPhone app to kind of send that over to it. Other than that, I think we've heard about blood glucose monitoring. Now I have a son who has type 1 diabetes, and that is kind of a big part of our lives. He is a bit of a cyborg now because he's got one of the Libra devices, which always tracks his blood glucose, but that is a needle to insert it, and then that lasts for 2 weeks, and then we replace it with another one. But I do get to scan him with my iPhone, so I do feel pretty futuristic, but I'm not sure how Apple would be able to do that without having some kind of probe into the skin. If they can, awesome. If they can't, not as awesome. Then Apple did a whole chunk on privacy, which I think we will certainly get again this year, but I'm also expecting if we get our April event, which we're still expecting, even though WWDC has been announced, that privacy is going to be a huge focus of that event too. So at the WWDC event, we got the approximate location being added, mic and camera status lights at the top of your screens on your iPhone and your iPad, and also app tracking transparency, which is exactly what we're expecting to be touched on at the April event when they launch iOS 14.5, which is the one that we've been waiting for quite a while. That's the one that's upsetting Facebook. They also added the privacy and nutrition labels, and Facebook's one is about 45 pages long. Then they moved on to Home. They open sourced the HomeKit protocols, as well as starting a new interoperability standard alliance with Google and Amazon and a few others. They brought in adaptive lighting, camera activity zones, announced visitors using face recognition from the camera on your doorbell and the faces you've already tagged in your photos. And they brought picture-in-picture to Apple TV to go along with this stuff. They also then gave us a big, huge kind of introduction to Isaac Asimov's Foundation, which is still not out, by the way. That will be coming, I think, next month. That series looks awesome, and it's got the guy that played one of the kings in The Crown, who was also in Chernobyl, who is pretty awesome. So, I don't know his name, because I'm terrible at this sort of thing, but if you know the guy that I'm talking about, you get a point if you get his name down in the comments for me. Then we moved on to macOS, and this is where they introduced Big Sur with its brand new design philosophy, new sounds, the sidebar that they'd introduced for the iPad apps coming to the Mac, more spacious menus, which made everyone think that touch might be coming to the Mac. The iPad-style touch control center, which also made everyone think that touch might be coming to the Mac. The notification center with widgets, which made people think that touch might be coming to the Mac. Most native apps getting updates from the iPadOS style, so things like messages became a Catalyst app. Safari got new start pages that are customizable, so it feels a little bit like your MSN kind of start page that you used to have way back in the 90s. That's just warm and fuzzy inside. But every year they also come out with a brand new name, and obviously we know that we've got macOS 12 coming this year because they've already leaked that in the WebKit stuff. Again, I asked the audience for suggestions on the name, and you guys did not disappoint. So the name suggestions that we had yesterday: DJ Jump Dancer offered macOS Venice, Jacob Elson macOS Shasta, don't know where that is, but I'm guessing it's in California. Tim Beaton came up with a lot: macOS Napa Valley, Mount Diablo, Morrow Rock, macOS Zabriskie Point, and macOS Santa Cruz. Not San Andreas Fault or Death Valley for obvious reasons, though, he says. Cleveland Ironman suggested macOS Sonoma or Santa Rosa, and I think Sonoma is a really good name for a macOS version. Greg Robel offered up macOS Capistrano. I'm not familiar with some of these places. And Phil Rosaleek mentioned we might do macOS Lake Tahoe to upset Intel. And then, of course, last year we also got our first reveal of Apple Silicon, so will we see any hardware here? Now, my thoughts at this point are that it seems like the MacBook rumours are drying up a little bit for April, so it might actually be that we only see iMacs in April, which is upsetting because I genuinely thought we were definitely going to be seeing those. I'm sure that we're going to be seeing at least the iMacs with M1X, but it might be that we have to wait till June for MacBooks. And let's be honest, that invite that we've seen has got a MacBook on it. Yeah, it looks a lot like when Craig Federighi opened that MacBook for the first time. Could we see some new MacBooks? Maybe. I think we will see the MacBooks before then, because M1X needs to come out before September, October time, because that's when we'll be seeing M2, which is the new lower powered stuff. So I'm pretty sure that we'll be getting M1X before then. However, the other bit of hardware that we might be seeing is the Mac Pro. I think we will get the reveal. I think it will go on sale in December. That's what they do with Pro stuff. I don't know why they always do that. Someone mentioned that it might be using up budget before the end of the year, but I would have thought that would be financial year based, not calendar year. But I could be wrong on that, but it does seem like they like to reveal Mac Pros at WWDC because it is the developers that generally want the super high powered stuff, along with like high-end video editors. So we could see it. We could see it there. We could find out what we're expecting. We will see. But the other thing that's in that invite, in every single image, is the emojis, the animojis, the memojis, whatever we're going to call them today. They're all wearing glasses, and they all have icons reflected in them. Are they being reflected off of that screen? Because that screen is at the wrong angle to reflect stuff. Or are they Apple Glass? Now, we all thought Apple Glass was going to come way later. We all thought Apple Glass was going to come past the VR stuff that Apple is working on. I think it's the other way around. John Prosser has said that he thinks Apple Glass is coming between March and June this year. That's way too early in my head, but it would be fabulous. But let's see what happens. He said between March and June 2021. Now, I read that and thought, does he mean 2022? Because we've run out of March now. Like, March is done. So, maybe we're going to see it. Maybe we're not. I don't know. But that invite is trolling as if not. Also, it's exactly 69 days before WWDC that they released this. Is Apple actually doing a 69 gag on us? But we will have to see what happens with that, if it is coming, if it's really coming. That's just going to blow everyone away. And it's been rumoured that Apple Glass is going to be somewhere around the $400 to $500 mark, which is kind of what the iPad started at when it first came out. I could see it happening. It's not a massive jump. These are going to be more like an Apple Watch than they are like a VR system. These are going to be more notification-based. The interface is called Starboard. John Prosser has already said that he is going to reveal it very, very soon because he's already seen Starboard. He's actually seen the Apple glasses. He says, and I have no reason not to believe him, he genuinely doesn't seem to leak anything he doesn't believe is true. He doesn't lie to us. He doesn't make stuff up. Everything that he tells us is come from sources, and I genuinely believe that he, at least, believes what he's being told. So we will see. But I want to see your predictions for WWDC down in the comments. Let me know what you're expecting. Use hashtag WWDC21. That will be quite good. And we're going to get into some iCave answers because I've got a whole bunch here. And the first one from Andrew, I told him I was going to answer yesterday and completely missed it. For some reason, my teleprompter decided not to show me it.
Viewer Andrew asks iCave Answers, do you think Apple will include a dedicated GPU in the MacBook Pro 16? The 15/16-inch always got a better graphics performance compared to the 13-inch version.
Okay, everything that you know about what they've done in the past is just entirely pointless in thinking about because the MacBook Air was always less powerful than the MacBook Pro, and the MacBook Air was always less powerful than the Mac Mini as well. So forget about what they've done in the past. And also, I don't think thinking of graphics as being discrete or integrated is going to make any difference now because they're being manufactured specifically for the hardware that we're using. In fact, if they went to discrete graphics, the performance would be worse because the reason that it does so well right now is because of that unified memory pool and how quickly the CPUs and the GPU can access that same pool of memory rather than having to copy it across a bus to the separated graphics. That's why everything's so snappy, that's why everything works as well as it does right now. That and the super fast storage and the memory being on the chip as well. That's part of the reason that it works as well as it does, so actually it will perform better if they keep it as part of a system on chip. So we will see, or a system on a package, which I think is actually more accurate to what it is because it seems that they actually build the CPU cores and the GPU cores and the memory as separate pieces and put them onto their own custom fabric. That's what I'm being told by people. I don't understand the chips at a deep enough level to know what that means particularly, but I am going to be doing some research to find out because I want to be able to share it with you guys. But that's what I'm expecting. I don't particularly expect much of a difference between a 14-inch and a 16-inch in terms of performance. It might just be a case of far better battery life on the larger one and also probably better cooling. So it might be a bit like the difference between the Air and the MacBook Pro 13 right now. So the 14 will have the same performance in bursts but not necessarily be able to sustain it as long, whereas the 16-inch will have the long-term high performance for stuff like rendering. Make sense? Hopefully. Thanks, Andrew.
Viewer Marcin Kowalczyk asks iCave Answers 1. Do you think there is a probable desktop Mac platform with no USB-A ports at all? Excluding laptops, since that's we've seen already. 2. Do you think an all-touchscreen keyboard for Mac desktop is an option is possible in the future? 3. Do you think rise of ARM platform in Macs will accelerate cross-platform malware Trojans development?
So this is a three-parter. First one, do we think there will be no USB-A ports on some of the desktops? Yes, but probably not this year, maybe next year. Right, there are patents out there for a solid-state keyboard, which is basically an iPad screen that's instead of your keyboard and trackpad. So basically you just get a kind of glass sandwich that opens up as a clamshell and then you type on the glass surface. I don't know if it would work very well. It depends how well they can do the palm rejection and how well they can kind of pay attention to what you're intending to press on and what you're not, and how good the haptic feedback is for it as well. If it feels like typing on a real keyboard, sure. And if they can get that palm rejection and the inadvertent touch rejection good, sure. But they're going to have kind of pressure zones on something like this in order to do that, which I think is less likely to be an easy thing to do. And as to part 3, do you think the rise of the ARM platforms in Macs will accelerate cross-platform malware and Trojan development? Trojans generally don't seem to care as much about like what platform you're on because it tends to be something that sits in like a browser or something like that. Yes, it probably will, but it's always a race between the hackers and the kind of malware makers and the platforms trying to keep it out. So the only thing that it might promote more is the idea of the system being locked down more and being more like iOS, where each app is sandboxed even more than it is right now. And also, in order to keep safe, it will probably push more people towards using the App Store rather than downloading stuff from websites. That would be my best guess. Browser extensions is the big thing that really needs to be addressed in making things a bit more secure, I think.
Marcin Kowalczyk, 16 hours ago I cave. David Eden Sengwin I cave answers, do you think iMac M1X display panel will be just a Nerf Pro XDR display with mini LED to simplify their tooling inventory, or some more exotic solution?
Yeah, I think if they're going to go to a 6K display in the iMacs, which I think is quite possible, and I think it might well be the same kind of front panel that they use in the Pro Display XDR, it will be basically, they'll reduce the complexity behind it, or they'll have found a way that they can basically make what they've got in the Pro Display XDR for a cheaper price. That's pretty much what I expect, yeah.
Rene Pulio question, do you ever see Apple selling its M1 chips to other PC companies? I can't see it short term, but the potential of Apple ARM chips seems so great. What happens when Apple leaves the competition in the dust?
So what happens when Apple leaves competition in the dust is they leave them in the dust, and that's fine. You will see a lot of other companies start to build more ARM-based chips, and you will probably see Microsoft put more focus onto Windows for ARM because they can see how it's going to scale a lot better than x86 is right now. In terms of Apple selling their chips to the open market, absolutely not. It won't make any sense, and it wouldn't work. The only reason that Apple Silicon works so well for macOS is because they have built it for macOS. So they've put in the hardware decoders that it needs for the file formats they use in macOS. It's put in place the x86 translator in hardware that is used specifically for running Rosetta 2, so that everything runs so much quicker than anyone expected. So putting those chips into something that's not, like half the chip would basically be sitting there doing nothing. The neural engine probably wouldn't be optimized for other stuff. Like, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done with that hardware that purely works because of Apple's own IP. So no, I absolutely don't see them selling them to anyone else for like commodity computing. No.
Marcin Kowalczyk, 16 hours ago e-cave, David Eden Sangwell I-cave answers, do you think Apple shoring up, effectively funding TSMC's R&D, is a part of Apple master plan long game? iCara, iHospital, iPlane, iCity?
Okay, in terms of Apple funding TSMC, they do pay for a lot of the kind of R&D and setting up the lines, but this is in return for getting massive amounts of that capacity. So, for example, we saw news over the past couple of days that Apple has placed their order for 4nm chips from TSMC, and the reports that I've seen said for Apple Silicon, which I think everyone's taken to mean Macs, but Apple Silicon is what they put into everything. It's all of their processors, their H1 chips, their wireless chips for headphones, it's in everything. It's in the watches, it's in the whole kit and caboodle. So it's not just for Apple Silicon Macs. The first of the silicon they're making on 4nm will probably go into the A16 chip, not this year, but next year, and then we'll be getting into 3nm pretty quickly after that as well, and Apple has pretty much bought the first year's production of 3nm from TSMC in advance, so nobody else has access to it. And that's kind of how Apple is playing the game right now.
Joe, 16 hours ago iCave answers, are you interested in a company called Spacex?
Well, yes, I am, and that is part of the reason why I didn't actually see the WWDC announcement as quickly as some others, because I was watching a Starship fall out of the sky and then explode before landing. So yeah, very interested in SpaceX stuff and just space in general. Big fan, follow Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut, all of his stuff, and a few others. What about it? There's loads of channels out there. If you've not got involved in what's going on in space right now, it's super exciting. Starlink, that's going to be what gives us internet on Mars too, I would guess. So yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. Thank you all for the questions. I'm going to wrap it up here because I think my iPhone is going to die, which is recording the show right now, and that would be a bad thing. But let me know down in the comments what you're expecting to see at WWDC and what you want me to deep dive into in future shows. Let's talk about it. See you in the next one.